Hello guys. We are going to start our live streaming, and today our live streaming will be with an interesting person, with a real philosopher. So the topic is to discuss philosophy and script writing. And since during our filmmaking course, KinoCamp, we've just finished discussing script, its structure, and we are going to go really hardcore. We're going to have a look at philosophy and how philosophy actually can help to make your script better, to see if it really can contribute to your understanding of script structure and the development of your character. So anyway, we will see if it really worth studying philosophy or considering looking at philosophy at this point of your script writing journey. And I'm going to invite our guest. So let's see if we can connect. And we cannot really see you like this.
You cannot. Small technical difficulty. Do I need to rotate myself somehow? Let me see.
You need to rotate yourself. Or we can go on and it can be some kind of like art house live stream.
Maybe you just tilt your head a little bit and we'll be in sync in that way. Sorry guys, it's just my first time trying to do that on Instagram, so you can see that I'm not very tech savvy as a real philosopher.
That's a great beginning.
I mean, I don't want to be holding this all the way through, but let's see. Is this better?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, okay. I guess so.
No, I hope it doesn't fall. All right.
You have to fix it.
Okay, all right.
Great. So, guys, this is Anton, and he's a philosopher, a real one, and he will tell you more about himself. So, why is he our guest today? So, Anton, please introduce yourself.
Thanks very much. I saw there was a little bit of a delay with my frame, but now you can hopefully hear and see me all right. So thanks very much for the invitation. Very, very happy to be and excited to be on here. So as Oksana mentioned, it is true that I'm a philosopher, although I spent most of my career in my life so far working as a legal consultant, but I developed a strong interest in philosophy back, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, and I started studying philosophy first on the undergraduate and on the graduate level. So I'm mostly interested, now I'm currently working on a thesis on the ethical issues of self-driving cars. Mostly interested myself in the issues of moral philosophy, philosophy of law, and political philosophy. But that said, of course, there are other issues that may be of interest that I have studied before. I'm sorry, I'm still struggling with this because I have the, maybe I have to connect different headphones or something. All right. Okay. All right. Right. So yes, and so the reason Oksana has invited me.
It's called the epic fail. So if you expect something like really serious here, guys.
Okay, I'll just like this. I'll take off the headphones. Can you still hear me? Okay.
Yeah, it should work.
Perfect.
No. Don't touch the phone.
Now, as you can see, I may be an expert in the philosophical issues, but cinematography is not my strongest side. I do get
That's
someone
true.
to help me out with that. So the reason Oksana has invited me on today is to talk about philosophy in film and how thinking about philosophical issues can help you on working on your script for your film. So I guess that's something that we will gonna get into a bit later today.
Great. Okay. So awesome. So in the past, you have like a legal lawyer background, so you can also have some practice with like entertainment law as well. But having this philosophy degree that you're pursuing now, so it will of course contribute to your more moral understanding of law as well, and I guess proceed with enjoying yourself in entertainment law as well. Is that true?
Right. Yes, I did some work in entertainment law before. I guess. So if the question is whether philosophy is somehow related to law, obviously is. And so my work right now, the thesis that I'm working on, it touches upon the interrelation between ethics and law and how those are intertwined in certain issues. So that's definitely true. But I think my interest in philosophy go beyond those issues, beyond the interrelations of ethics and morality, and it's just a way to form a better understanding of how this world works and how we address all the problems that we face in this life, and to make sense and get some meaning out of it.
So, and how do you progress with it? So, do you get more understanding of life, and did your life become easier or more, I don't know, maybe in a way simple or even more complicated? So, how did your life change with philosophy in it?
Well, I can't say that it has become a lot easier or more complicated. I guess it's just bringing more insight and reflection into your life and trying to live your life in an examined way. There's definitely a lot more analysis going on, although part of philosophy is learning to how to let go of some analysis in some cases, because you have to find a way to understand that human condition requires not only the analytical capacities, but sometimes also the possibility of letting go and just enjoying the moment. So that can be a philosophy in itself.
Okay. So, if we go back to the moment that you got really interested in philosophy, so what were your first steps to start reading something in philosophy or studying philosophy? Because, for example, I guess I have some filmmakers out there who write scripts themselves, or they just try to, or they're making films themselves, and at some point they may start thinking that they need to add more philosophy, but for example, they don't have anything connected with philosophy, they never studied philosophy. So, and probably they found themselves at the moment that you found yourself some back time in the past. And so, how to start pursuing these studies in philosophy?
Yeah. Well, I think like with any field, the most important thing is to get introduced to the right people. And I was very lucky and privileged in that way to have met some people that I have developed a friendship with and who introduced me to these issues and sort of acted as my guides in the field. So I think my best advice to you, if you're generally interested in philosophy, to find some philosophers who could be professional philosophers or philosophy students who have some background knowledge of the different areas in the field, and who could sort of provide you a general guidance as to what you should look at, what you should read. There are a lot of online reading groups out there. There's a lot of literature, but as with any field that goes back, hundreds and thousands of years, it's like coming into a bar, coming to a conversation that has been going on for many centuries, and you were not a part of it from the beginning, and you just join after these people have been discussing the issues for many hours. And so you need someone to basically recap it for you and give you a short summary of what's been going on. And the best way to do it is, I guess, to talk to someone who's been doing it for a little longer than yourself. And then with a little help, you can, do some reading yourself. You can become a part of some reading groups. You can register for an online course, or maybe do a degree. It all depends on how much time and effort you want to put into it and how much interest you develop. But I guess if your question is more practical, say you're working on a script for your next film, and you need, rather than taking a background course that will give you an overview of the main philosophical questions that have been troubling in humanity since the beginning of time, you just want some suggestions or some clarity on where you can develop that thing. There's such a thing as philosophy consultancy, and there are many people, including myself, who do that. And you can approach them, have them read your script, have them suggest some ideas to you, or look at and play with some ideas together and see where that can take you.
Mm-hmm. So actually, for example, if you cannot, like as a filmmaker or scriptwriter, like contribute now to your philosophy studies, you don't really have time, or maybe you're not really interested in pursuing this kind of knowledge, but still you want to have some kind of like philosophical analysis or philosophical consultancy of your script or your story that you are developing. Here I need to give a little bit more information. It's something new that is happening nowadays, is that when philosophers are invited to analyze the idea of the film, like the future film. So at the stage of just creating the idea, writing the synopsis, because it's the initial stage where you can rather think more before you start writing. So you can catch up on reading something, you can think, you can really discuss with like a philosopher or like a philosophy consultant for film your future project, so that not to make mistakes, so that not to come to sort of like a dead end in your story where you cannot really develop your character, you're stuck with the story, you cannot move on. So so we also have like a script doctor, but script doctor doesn't really have to be a philosopher. So script doctor is more like a script writer with a lot of experience. But when we're talking about philosophy, so I need to mention some information that even some famous film directors who were script writers as well for their films, they also got degree in philosophy. So Terrence Malick, Wes Anderson, Ethan Coen, even from a little bit the beginning of cinema, like Friedrich Murnau, so they got degree in philosophy, and you know their films, so they are of course great films. We know these great directors. Or for example, some other film directors who didn't really study philosophy, but they really got very great grasp of philosophy. Tarkovsky, Bergman, Antonioni, Fellini, Bresson, and so on and so forth. So, of course, some of their films, they are based on original scripts. Some of their films are based on adaptation of great novels, but still to adapt and to develop script in some direction, it's a great work. And therefore, you can already see that philosophy and script writing can be connected pretty well, and they can contribute to each other. So it's a new step to collaborate between philosophers and script writers. So as a philosophy consultant for film, so how can this work or step be developed? So what's the main, what actually a philosophy consultant for film can do, can contribute to the story at the stage of like idea or probably synopsis, or even if, for example, script is written, but something is missing, so they want to make it better.
Right. So I guess the way it usually works is that a person would come to you with a script, and the script usually, or not even a script, it may be just a synopsis or an idea they have. But what they would have some plot in mind, some story to tell. and it would tell you the story. And so looking at the story, the next stage is sort of issue spotting. It's something that is similar to the legal consulting. Like imagine you're a lawyer and a client comes to you and they say, well, we want to put together some kind of deal, and you want to look and spot the issues that they need to do due diligence about, or that they need some clarity about before they can proceed. And as a lawyer, your task is sort of to spot these issues and outline those for the client and say where they should be aware of certain things and what kind of things they should be thinking of right now, not to get themselves into some problem in litigation later. So the way that philosophy consulting is similar to that is that it also involves a kind of issue spotting, but here you're spotting the issues not to help your client avoid litigation in the future. Your idea, your role is to help them develop that script into something with more layers, something deeper in a sense. And so, as all of you would know, film typically has many layers to it. There's something on the surface. There's some plot going on, some story, some funny jokes, some beautiful shots, beautiful pictures. There's an aesthetic value to the film. But underneath that, there's also an opportunity to take sort of a deeper look at the issues. And for myself and for many people, what they're looking for in a film is some kind of questions, some kind of ideas, to walk away from the screening with something to think about, or maybe even to not to walk away, but while you're watching the film, this question may start to pop up in your head and will give you some food for thought. And so you can see the task of a director or the filmmaker as introducing enough depth into their film so that the viewers would have that food for thought. And that's where philosophy comes in, because as with other forms of art, say literature, for instance, there are different genres, of course, and there is some literature that can be very superficial and sort of on the level, but it would never make good literature. So if you want to make a good film, you want to introduce this philosophical questions into it so that people will keep discussing it, the critics will keep reviewing it, and ultimately it will lead to a greater commercial success of your film as well, because it will be appealing to a broader audience in a sense. And so, once you see the original plot, then you sort of spot the initial topics that the plot is trying to cover, and you're trying to come up with to link that with the philosophical background and the philosophical issues that they may raise. And that, of course, depends on the kind of picture you're trying to make. It can be a sci-fi film, it can be a social drama, it can be a comedy. But in all of these types of genres, there is a place for philosophical issues. It can be asking questions about morality, about political philosophy, such as how do we create a more just society. It can be asking questions about philosophy of mind and the possibility of artificial intelligence and things like that. And so the next step for the philosophy consultant is to offer the client the ways to develop that picture, that script, in a way that those topics become sort of the centerpiece of the picture. And the way to develop this is to guide them through the various positions and arguments that have been expressed on a given topic, and see how the plot can be tweaked, how the dialogues can be changed, how new lines and new characters can be introduced, so that to amend the script accordingly, basically. Or you can also offer some new topics that perhaps the author has not so far thought of themselves, but they can be organically introduced into the script without sort of distorting the plot in any way. So those are the kind of things to think about. And then the next stage would be, it really all depends on how the scriptwriter wants to pursue it. Some of them want you to just give them the ideas and the background and sort of lecture them on some of these issues. Some of them want you to read through these things with them and sort of collaborate together on seeing where it takes them. And it's really up to the client how they want to organize and pursue that. So there are many formats here available.
Okay, well that's great, of course, because at this point many problems can be identified, and so the script can be really put maybe on the one hand like in a deeper direction, so some interesting developments can be identified, or it can be put even like in new direction. So because, for example, like from my personal experience, if you write the script yourself, so it's quite, you see the story only from one angle. So, and you base it, for example, if you write something like based on your personal experience, so just one point of view, then you can describe some imaginary situations and implement them into the script, but still it's just you.
Right.
Another point is that, for example, if you collaborate with a script writer or like a script doctor who just navigates you in script structure so that you follow the script, you follow the like 3-act structure or like the hero's journey of the character, so that you're like in the standard. But the thing is that you lack is the questions that the character should ask himself or herself, and of course when the character asks the questions himself herself, so that's the questions that are addressed to the audience as well, because we are connected to the character, so we are thinking and making the sort of the same decisions that the character on the screen. So, and in this case, just one script writer or like a film director, if he or she writes the script as well. So it's better to have like one more person with strong background whose profession is to ask questions, to build the arguments, to contribute, and to have like another point of view of the story.
Yeah, really, that's true. I mean, it's not that you're just getting one person to have a different point of view, because that person would be, to use Isaac Newton's term, standing on the shoulders of giants, meaning that he would be relying on the experience of the humanity in a sense. So, of course, it's very important for your script or your film to express a personal point of view. But looking at it from a philosophical point of view is a way to connect that and to relate that to the experience of the humanity at large. Because what makes questions philosophical is that they usually never have a definite answer, and people disagree about how to answer them. And there's something about the nature of these questions that turn them into, this never-ending arguments. And so it's sort of a way to look at our life and the human condition from the point of view of many generations of different thinkers, and that doesn't just bring you another person's perspective on your script; it brings you the perspective of the humanity at large. You can say.
Yeah, that's the great scale. Of course, we're talking about the films which can really set you on a thinking journey, and it will really contribute to your another way of thinking or understanding of the problem or question being discussed in the film.
Yeah.
So when we talk about philosophy and some really great films, so they're usually something serious or really maybe a little bit of another level of understanding, but can actually we have some philosophical layers or subtext in not so serious films. So maybe it's just implemented differently. But for example, in some really simple films or like plain comedies, for example, if we're writing a script of a comedy, so can we also connect to a philosopher so that to have like a philosophical view? on this
No,
subject as well?
absolutely. I think humor can be and should be philosophical because I mean there are different levels of humor. There's sort of skip and fall kind of humor, and then there's the kind of humor where you have very developed dialogues that are just funny on the surface level, but when you think about them for a moment, you realize that they raise rather serious questions. And so most of the good comedies would be like that. They would actually be, perhaps what they call the tragic comedies. So there's a little bit of comedy
Mm-hmm.
and drama in them. So the comedy would be
Yeah.
is that they make you laugh, but they also make you think about the human condition and some of the, eternal philosophical questions, and they make you realize something. So yeah, there's definitely a place for philosophy in a comedy film.
So you don't really have to focus on some drama
Hmm.
genre, for example, or some serious sci-fi film or script. So it can be anything because you can find philosophical layers in every genre, like in every film.
Yeah, yeah. I think most of the good films they would really be a mixture of different genres, and they would definitely have a philosophical layer to them. I mean, there's one film we're gonna talk later on today, so that would be a good example.
Yeah, okay, so I guess we are moving into this direction. But for example, when you watch different films, so and you follow the story and characters, so how soon can you, for example, identify the structure that it already follows some philosophical questions? Can you already predict some plot development that, for example, they would probably mention this side of this question that they're trying to
Hmm.
discuss in the film? So, and how can you maybe sometimes even like predict the ending? So, because you navigate yourself in philosophy quite well, so and you know that it should be done and resolved this way, for example.
Hmm. Well, yeah, that's a good question. I think actually a lot would depend on how well thought the script is and whether there were actual philosophers involved in the film. And I know a lot of directors like to hire the consultants to work with them on the scripts, or they have their own backgrounds. I can't say that it's always predictable how the story is going to unfold once you have spotted a certain philosophical question, because what's distinctive of the philosophical questions is they don't have any definite answers, and the author can go either way. They can sort of present their own point of view, sort of subtly in the film, and sort of hint at what they think might be the right answer, or they can give you sort of options to look at it from different angles and help you and guide you through making your own decision about that. Or they can just leave you wondering in the end. They can just sort of raise the issue and without outlining any responses to it, just leave you at it and have you walk away from the film just wondering about that question. So I don't think that just merely spotting the issue will give you the predicting power to see how the story unfolds. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So there's no clear view on that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, could you please tell us about your favorite films that you really enjoy from philosophical point of view,
Hmm.
and something that really attracts your attention as a philosopher, or maybe just as a viewer of
Hmm.
some film? And so, why do you choose these films, or some certain film directors or script writers? So, what is the most interesting for you in these
Hmm.
films?
Well, yeah. So as we mentioned, you've already mentioned a number of directors who have philosophical background, and they will inevitably bring some depth and philosophy into their films, and I certainly agree with that. I think that said, I mean, you can find some issues if you train enough. You can spot them in almost any good film that comes out. For myself personally, there are some directors that I found to be more philosophically interesting than others. Well, I'm a big fan of Coen Brothers, for instance, and so I suggest we can perhaps go into the example of one of my favorite films by Coen Brothers, which is called The Serious Man. I think it's from 2009 or something around that. Although all their films have a distinctive philosophical component to it, so we could perhaps talk about others, like Inside Llewyn Davis, for instance, is another good example. But I think A Serious Man raises a number of interesting questions that could set you thinking in different directions.
Okay, because it's very nice that we can go with Coen Brothers, because one of the brothers, Ethan Coen, so he has degree in philosophy. So they both brothers, they are script writers and they are film directors for their films. And they got a lot of nominations, awards for their films, so they're world-known film directors. But we cannot really say that their films is something like blockbusters, probably, or some standard films. We can identify Coen Brothers from a little bit different and maybe in a way original scripts as well, because they have this interesting point of view. And when you watch their films, for me, I cannot really predict what will happen. And because for me, it's always a problem to be connected to film and not to look at different structural components or some, for example, different works of different departments like cinematography or acting or even directing. So, and when you watch films by Coen Brothers, so they have this special ingredient in their films, and probably, maybe because one of the brothers is a philosopher with a degree. I don't know, but when you usually watch the films with philosophy degree, people involved in the film, like film director or script writer, it's sort of a different level of films. I don't know why, but it is a different level of films. So probably it has to do something with philosophy. So, yeah. And if you want to go through this, one of their most interesting films, A Serious Man, so I guess it will be quite interesting to see how you see this film as a philosopher, because I'm in a way ordinary person watching this film. I don't have a degree in philosophy, but I'm interested in philosophy. So what's so interesting and what we should pay attention to when watching this film, besides the story? What's behind the story? What's the subtext of the story?
Right, yeah, that's quite interesting actually, because first time I saw that film, which was, I think, over 10 years ago, I think at that point I wasn't studying philosophy yet, although I did have an interest in it, but I didn't have any systematic knowledge of the field. But that film impressed me very much, because I walked away from the film sort of rethinking some of the values that I had, and it sat me into this kind of mode, a very reflective one, and that's what I liked about it. Perhaps at that time, seeing that film for the first time, I wasn't able to spot all the issues that I would be able to spot now. But as you say, as a regular viewer, I was very much impressed by it, and perhaps it's one of those films that might have inspired my interest in philosophy in the first place. So I don't know to what extent our viewers are familiar with the plot. Maybe a brief summary would be in order.
Yeah,
and,
please.
Well, a good thing about the Coen Brothers films is that you cannot spoil them by telling the plot, and that's what makes this film distinctively philosophical, because you can tell the plot in 1 or 2 sentences, but you're not giving anything away. It's not like the person is going to be, oh no, you've spoiled that for me, now there's no point in watching the film. So I encourage all of you who haven't seen the film to go see it, but for those of you who don't have the time, here is a 2-3 sentence summary. So
no spoilers.
Yeah, and there are no spoilers, so just the plot. I'll give away the plot. So basically it tells the story of a man. His name is Larry Gopnik. He's a professor of physics living in suburban Minnesota. in a Jewish community, so he's Jewish himself, and he has a wife and 2 kids who he's raising in the Jewish faith. And then all of a sudden, there's a series of misfortunate events that start happening to this man. So he's a professor, but he's failed one of the students, and at some point he's finding this envelope with money in his desk, and he realizes that the student is trying to bribe him, and he tries to give that money back, and then the student tries to blackmail him. Also, he realizes that there's some person who's writing letters to the tenure committee at the university because he's about to get tenure, that is to become a permanent professor at the university. But there is some hater that writes a letter to the committee saying that he shouldn't get the tenure. Then also he realizes at some point that his wife is having an affair with his friend, and now she wants a divorce at some point, and then she decides that instead of him moving out of the house with this other man, that Larry himself should move out of the house. His teenage children are also having some problems. One of them is a stoner, kind of a drug addict, and his daughter is fixed on getting a nose job, and
so he's not a happy man.
he's not a happy man, right? So and then he gets into an accident. His lawyer dies in front of him. His brother lives on his couch in his home and is also being accused. He's got into some kind of a problem with the law, and he has to pay for the bill for that. So there's a series of this event, and they begin to unfold one after the other. And so the man begins to question, so what's wrong? Why is all this happening to me? And so because he is a devoted he's so much devoted to his faith, he goes to see a series of, I think, 3 different rabbis and ask them the question of what he's done wrong and what he should do. And so this is basically the plot. But so it raises a number of different questions about, and we can talk about them depending on how much time we have. Questions about theology, about religion, about person's relationship with God. We can talk about moral philosophy. We can bring in some Nietzsche and existentialism in it, Sartre, Camus, and talk about indeterminacy of moral rules and the like. But I guess coming back to the first time I saw that film, I guess the first issue to spot there is the relationship with God and the sort of understanding of what obligations one might have to God and what obligations God has to oneself. And the immediate parallel here that you can bring is with the book of Job, which is one of the books in the Hebrew Bible, and it also has found its way to the Old Testament. So basically the story of Job in that book is very similar to, in some ways similar to our main hero in the film. So Job is a righteous man, and at some point Satan decides, well, Satan is having like a bet with God, and he comes to God and he says that, of course Job is righteous because you have blessed him. He has good health, he's quite rich, he's quite well off, he has his children in his state, but why don't we have a bet so we take these things away from Job, and we'll see if he'll remain faithful to you, if he'll remain a righteous man after all that. And God says, yeah, okay, sure, let's do that, let's see what happens. And I bet that Job would remain as faithful as he is now. Mm-hmm. So all the terrible things start happening to Job. So his children die, his house collapses, and he got sick. And he starts wondering, just in the same way as our hero Larry wonders. So what have I done wrong? What's going on? What's the deal here? And so he's consulting his friends, and his friends tell him, you must have done something wrong because God is fair, so he only punishes those who have done something wrong. And this comes back to the sort of the concept that is distinct to the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Judaic tradition, the Judaic concept of God, whereas God makes some kind of a covenant with people, and so he postulates a number of rules that you have to follow, and if you're good, if you follow those rules, which are quite easy, you're good, you contribute to the community, then good things must happen to you. Quite easy. A good life is really accessible. And so the point is that Job, just like Larry, wonders, well, I haven't broken any rules, so why are the bad things happening to me? And so one of the answers that his friends are giving him is that, you must have done something wrong. Maybe you just don't remember, you don't know, but otherwise, why would God punish you? And so Job's immediate response to that is to say that, well, look, even if I have done something wrong, it must be something so minuscule that it doesn't warrant such a disproportionate response from God, because God has to be fair, right? So
Yeah.
if it were some, small trifle thing, then I just don't deserve that. And then, part of the bet between God and Satan was that once Job realizes that God is not upkeeping his part of the deal, he would stop being righteous. So he will stop doing all the good things. He would stop being a good person. And that hasn't happened to Job. And the reason why Satan was betting against that, he was saying that, well, some people are righteous out of self-interest. So they want to be good because they think if they're good, good things will happen to them.
That's true.
But if someone is good despite bad things happen to them, then they're really righteous. So, and Job he satisfied that test. So he continued to be a good person. He hasn't started doing bad things all of a sudden, but he started sort of complaining to God and saying that God is unfair. And he started complaining not just about himself and his condition, because being placed in that kind of situation made him realize that there are other people in the world that are suffering for no reason. And he said, God, if you're, righteous and you're fair, why are these people happening? Why are so many people being mistreated? Why are they suffering? And so at the end of the story, God comes to Job and he, answers to his question with another question. And he tries to share his wisdom, and he says, like, well, Job, can you tell me where you were when I made this world, right? And he whispers something into his ear, which we don't know what it is, but it makes Job realize that, the information that God has access to is something that he would never be able to understand. It's just basically beyond his capacity, and so he shouldn't be asking God those questions, but he should just accept that if something happens, then God must have a reason for that. Now, is that a satisfying answer? And this is the same answer that our hero gets from the rabbis at some point as the plot unfolds. And there's at least one rabbi that tells him that you should just change your perspective. You shouldn't expect an answer from God because God doesn't owe you any answers. So the rabbi sort of invites for him to search for an answer within himself. But so this raises an interesting question, and this argument. So the fable about Job, it has this kind of a religious answer to it, which we have just outlined, saying that you cannot know all the God's mysteries, but it can also be used as an argument against God's existence, a sort of, it's known as a problem of evil, saying that if all this unexplained evil, all these terrible things exist in the world, and we don't have an explanation to them, and God could have easily, avoided these things from happening, then perhaps there shouldn't be an all good God in the end. And so this is sort of another answer to that, and it can make you our hero in the film. He constantly questions. He asks, "What have I done wrong? I've done nothing wrong." Or he says something like, "What's going on? I haven't done anything," is one of his mantra. He says, "I haven't done anything." And that sort of links that to his expectation that, if something happens to him, it must be about something that he has done. But what if there is no God, and so God doesn't care and doesn't control things? And perhaps there is no teleology. Teleology meaning the explanation of the phenomena of events in terms of the purpose they serve. So what if the things that happen have no purpose? They have just causes, but they have no meaning to them. There's no some objective cosmic purpose for us or our existence, no purpose behind the events, they're just causes. And so you have to accept the absurd. And this is the idea of the absurdity of life, that the fact that life has no meaning to it, is one of the tenets of existentialism, is one school of thinking that has developed in the 20th century, often associated with Camus, among the rest, although he rejected the label. And so he speaks of these topics in his books. One of them is the plague, that is very topical currently in the time of the pandemic, because what happens in the plague is that there is a story of a town that lives through the pandemic, and there's an outbreak of the plague, and people start questioning, what have we done wrong to cause this epidemic? And there's actually a figure there, a priest that preaches and says exactly that thing, that, you know, this is a punishment for your sins, so you should look and try to identify what is it that you have done. But anyway, so the existentialist response to that story would be, look, there's no God, there is no meaning, things just happen, shit happens, and you have to embrace that. But embracing the fact that things happen to you for no reason is the first step in developing your own values and getting on with your life and coming up with meaning. And this is an important condition of your freedom to become free to develop your own values. So there's a whole philosophy that can be built just on the basis of and starting with this fable of Job. But then I guess another thing that we can talk of is the Coen brothers' work is often associated with the German philosopher of the late 19th century, Friedrich Nietzsche. And Nietzsche has also traditionally been very critical of Judaism and Christianity. Well, he didn't really differentiate between them, seeing Christianity as sort of a spin-off of Judaism, and he can largely be seen as criticizing sort of the Judeo-Christian tradition. And one of his famous works is the Genealogy of Morals, when he builds up the critique of some of the Christian and Judaic values, and he sees them as sort of growing out of some kind of a resentment of the oppressed class. But what's important in that work for us is that one of his critique is that the central place in the Christian ethic is played by this purification and internalization of the feeling of indebtedness, of sin, of guilt, and it gives you sort of the negative assessment to the guilty person's basic sense of personal worth, and so it becomes the condition for pathological desire for self-punishment. And so this is something that is seen in the film, actually, because you know, when all these terrible things happen to our hero, he's only questioning if there's something that he himself has done wrong. He never takes any actions, like when his wife decides to leave him and move in with his friends, or when he's being you know, harassed by the student, blackmailed by his student. A thought doesn't come into his mind that there are other people that might have done something wrong, and there's nothing wrong about what he has done. But he's also questioning himself, and this is something that can be linked to the Judeo-Christian ethics, through the sort of constant search for your own saying, for desire to sort of punish yourself. And so, yeah, so this is a way to also begin to doubt not only things like God's existence and God's obligation to yourself, but also to doubt your sort of your values, your general outlook. And so this is, I guess, the second line that's obvious in the film. And the third line, I guess, is, which is interesting, is Larry's interaction with these different rabbis that he comes to see.
Mm-hmm.
And none of them, well, the third rabbi, Rabbi Marshak, he just doesn't want to see him. And the two guys actually see him, but they don't give him any sort of precise answers about what he should do or what's the cause of this trouble. So they tell him things like, you should change your perspective, or look at the parking lot, or things like
no solution.
right. Or the second rabbi, he tells him this story of a dentist, like, and he's supposed to make something out of that. So they don't give them the solution. They give give him like some kind of general principles. And that points at sort of deficiency of the moral systems that we have, and in particular of the moral system of the religion that's built on some list of general principles and rules that we should follow. But it gives you no way to apply those rules and to see what happens when those rules come into conflict with each other. So it gives you no way to apply those rules to the real life situation. There's some indeterminacy in it, right? So the rules tell you, like, be good, don't do this, don't do that, but they don't tell you what happens in a situation when, you know, bad things happen to you and someone has done something wrong to you, and to what extent you can do something wrong in return, for instance, or things like that. So this just points at the sort of general insufficiency or indeterminacy of a ideal moral system that the religious moral system is trying to be. And it's still relevant in our sort of post-religious world of today, where many people are not religious, but we still inherit this concept of morality as a set of rules that are supposed to be action guiding. But when we face the real life situation, we have no idea of how to apply those rules to actually decide what we have to do. And so that can point us towards developing some kind of a different new methods of how to approach the moral problems. Those are the situations where there are reasons for acting one way and there are reasons for acting in a different way. And those reasons conflict with each other. And we have to decide which way we want to act. But we can't do so without violating one of the rules. And so this is the situation of a true moral dilemma or a true moral problem. And any system of morality that can be action guiding, it's supposed to answer those questions. It's supposed to give you guidance for action. And that's something that traditional moral systems cannot do. And I think that's the reason why the rabbis or the sages or any typical wise man of today wouldn't give you a clear answer about what you should do when you're facing a real problem, and you should try and work out that answer yourself. And there's a lot of work for you here to do for moral philosophers also. So I guess those are the three main lines and takeaways from the film that have impressed me and have given me a lot of food for thought.
So can we actually say that some films, and especially the film A Serious Man, can be a visualization of some philosophical issues, some philosophical areas? And sometimes, for example, it's really difficult for a person to perceive the written information in the book, so he or she can just watch a film and to have a nice journey while watching a film through some philosophical dilemmas or questions.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about that, and there's been a question actually whether film can contribute to the film, to the field, to philosophy. That is, whether films can be used to advance certain arguments. Now, of course, it's hard to say that filmmakers actually bring something new to the arguments, although there's no logical impossibility of that. Perhaps you can think of some new argument and you can express that through the medium of film. But usually films are used as sort of heuristic devices, as a way to explain the problem and make it available for the general public to see, and they can serve as a good introduction to the problem. And they often used even in philosophy classes when you want to make an example of how a certain problem plays out in real life, you can play a short clip from a film and it becomes obvious for everyone. So
Yeah.
I guess films are a great form for the introduction to the problems, to start you thinking in a certain direction, and then you can take that thinking further and think about it for yourself.
Okay, well, that's great. That can be like a really great ending to our live streaming when we try to combine philosophy and script writing, filmmaking, so that to, in the end, to make a great film that can contribute both to film industry, to entertainment, and of course to philosophy studies, so that then philosophy professors and students can watch some film and maybe even understand better some concepts that they're struggling to understand while reading the books as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think back of this video lecture I made the other day, and I used a short clip from The Good Place, which is a TV series, to illustrate the problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a great contribution to the lecture.
Well, that's very nice, and I guess it's even now working, and you can really see for yourself that this collaboration is already happening. So, and of course, sometimes now we're saying that the quality of films, the quality of stories, and some plot development, character development, it's becoming a little bit not so great. So people and script writers especially, they don't really try too hard so that to think about the story from different aspects. So therefore, when we go and watch a film, so we expect much more and we don't get it and we're upset. So, and it happens already at the stage of idea of the film. It's plot, synopsis, and of course the script. So script is the most important part of film, and if it's not great, then, well, you will just enjoy the beautiful picture.
No, that's true. That's true. And there's, I mean, for a good film, there's more to the picture than meets the eye. And once you've seen some good films, you usually come to the cinema expecting more. And if you don't get that, you're disappointed. So that's all the reason. So the standard is almost always rising. The bar is rising, and that's the reason why filmmakers and scriptwriters in particular should be thinking all the philosophical problems already at the stage when they're just playing with the idea or writing the script, because that's the key to the success of your film.
Okay, yeah, well, hopefully. And so, Anton, please remind our viewers again, so what you're doing personally in this direction, so how people can find you, and so, because I guess we're just going to run out of the time, so advertise yourself.
Right, sure. So as I said, I've worked with people who are script writers or directors perhaps, who already have a script ready. So they come to me with the ideas, and I help them bring some philosophical depth into the ideas they're trying to develop. I look at their scripts and at their plots and suggest how it can be changed to reflect the ideas that it may be raising. So I help to guide their thinking. I help to open up their mind to some new ideas they haven't thought about, and see how the plot can be changed accordingly to help them develop those.
Well, that's great. So that's the first help and the main help. And so this kind of help is called philosophy consultancy for film. And if you just want to find out what Anton is doing, so you can go to his profile, and Anton is also doing some YouTube videos about different philosophical problems, so you can just meet and see.
I should maybe mention that, if you have any questions about philosophy and how to approach a certain issue, just beginning and starting out to study, feel free to reach out to me. Maybe I can give you some advice and direct you in the right direction.
Okay, great. We also have one more question, like what if, I guess, scriptwriters or filmmakers don't know anything about philosophy? Well,
So you don't have to know anything about philosophy to actually do philosophy. So you may just come with an idea and a script, and I can help you spot the issues, the philosophical issues that it raises. I can, discuss those with you, direct you to some readings. We can look at this together, and part of my role is to educate you about these things. So you don't have to, you don't need to have any sort of knowledge before you approach me. So that's the way to
so
go.
there are some special people who can do this
Yeah.
this work for you. Okay, well, that was great. Thank you very much for joining us, for having this interesting conversation, and I hope that filmmakers and scriptwriters out there would be interested in philosophy, pursuing
Yeah,
philosophy.
thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be on here, and I hope I'll see you all guys sometime soon.
Bye bye, guys.